The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight, those in the chat room and those listening from around the world. Tonight, if you have questions for us, you can private chat them to either Ceiling Cat or myself. And Jeff's not in the chat room yet, but if he gets in, you can also private chat him. And we will get questions answered for you. If you're listening from somewhere else, you can come over to the ParaXRadioNetwork.com and join in the chat room there. Or if you prefer, you can send us an email to theparanormalview@gmail.com with a question, and we will get them and answer them for you. Tonight we have with us Barbara Duncan.
I am here.
And we got Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello.
And of course we have a great guest lined up for tonight that Jeff will introduce in a second. I just want to let everybody know that stay safe, stay hunkered down, wear masks when you go out. And Barbara, what is it you say all the time?
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Yes. So hopefully we can have us a fun show tonight and get a lot of information. So I think what we'll do is have Jeff introduce our guest. Maybe. Jeff, you still with us? Don't tell me I've lost him already.
It shows him on.
Huh. Oh, well.
Unless the little beast has his microphone muted.
Probably. Okay. Barbara, you want to introduce him?
Okay. Well, I don't have his bio here, but he is the director of Ohio MUFON. Please welcome back the legendary Thomas Wertman.
Legendary.
Legendary.
And you know, Henry, I thought I was the only one who used that word hunker too.
Okay, Jeff is back, so Jeff will give you the proper. Yeah,
all right, why don't you do the proper?
Yeah, exactly. Well, tonight we have
just
one of our.
Include the word legendary.
Yeah.
Fine. Tonight we have one of our favorite legendary returning guests, Thomas Wertman, a former dean of the American National University, the state director at MUFON, and former co-director at, but still works with the Cleveland Ufology Project. So welcome back, Thomas Wertman. Yay!
Hey, I'm back. Okay. It's great to be back too.
Well, it's always good to have you back, though, because we can ask one little question and let you talk for 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I noticed that, you know. I was doing a show the other night, too, and you love this, Honor Henry. The guy does the same thing. It's a segment I do for about a half hour, a show a half hour a month. And this guy basically sits down and lets me roll for a half hour. Well, I said, let's switch it up on him. And halfway through, I said, okay, let's put it back in his lap. and I could tell he was doing dishes or something in the house because I could hear dishes clattering and everything else.
Oh, no.
Oh, it was funny. I loved it, at least from my end. And but I enjoy your show, though. It's great.
Well, we try to make it great and interesting. So,
yeah, it's a lot like putting on that long playing record, and then going off to the bathroom. Yeah.
Exactly.
Bohemian Rhapsody followed by Paradise by the Dashboard Light. You know.
Yeah.
Or Hey Jude.
or you forget to mute Yeah.
Oh.
All right. I guess, why don't we just start, because I talked with you a little bit earlier, and with everybody more or less kind of staying in and not everybody out running around, how is it with people reporting that they've seen UFOs, etc.? Maybe they hang out on their deck or at night or something. Does people see more or not?
Well, after you emailed me that question the other day, I went back and pulled some data today from the MUFON database. And one of the things I looked at was, before I pulled the data, is how many reports you see on the internet, period. There's certain websites that put a lot of new reports out there. A number of them pick it up, by the way, from the MUFON database, and you just kind of republish the information we've got out there already. But I've seen fewer reports on blogs than what I have in the past. And I kind of almost gave me the impression that, okay, if I'm seeing fewer reports on these different blogs out there, then maybe overall numbers are down. Well, I went back and pulled the numbers for March to begin with this year, and actually I even pulled them for April. And one of the things I found out is for March, the reports were way up compared to last year. Last year in March, we had 400 reports coming into MUFON across the whole United States. And this year, we've got 672 for March. So you're seeing almost it's over about 40% increase, roughly, off the top of my head. So the numbers are up quite a bit.
Could that because
one of the things you have to... Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey. No,
I was going to say, is it possible because we've noticed so much cleaning up, like the Earth is taking care of itself, like, oh, these humans are finally out of my hair, and there's a lot less light pollution.
Well, so you're right. Yeah, that's one potential thing. But when I started pulling the reports, one of the things we ran into here in the state I'm in Ohio, last year in March, we had 14 reports, which is about average. I mean, the weather's kind of overcast that time of year. We're still getting snow off and on. And so 14 is about right. This year we had 34. So we had over 100% increase. I mean, the numbers were pretty high. But I actually investigated 20 some of those cases myself. And what I found out is a lot of those are all attributed to one thing. Elon Musk. And he's got this big project. Got this big project rolling right now called Starlink.
Yes.
And Starlink is his project where they're going to be putting 10 or 14,000 satellites in space eventually. Yeah. And these satellites are going to be designed to help give internet accessibility to the whole world. So they're launching roughly 60 of these at a time. So in other words, here's this one rocket up, and basically it's almost like laying eggs as it goes across space. Here's one satellite coming out after another one, and there's 60 of them in this one rocket. Well, as these things deploy, they're in a long string, and they take on a resemblance of a train going across the sky. You see a series of lights. And when I saw the cases coming into Ohio, right away I had a good idea of what it was, but I still went ahead and ran all my other research anyway. And you could see that 20 of these cases basically said the same thing. They saw the objects coming from the same direction to the sky on the same night at the same time frame. And the description of them basically was almost identical. And when I went back and pulled the website's information from SpaceX, it confirmed that that's exactly what they were seeing. We also, when you go back, this was like the sixth launch. There's been 6 different launches of these things going back a year. And if you go back to some of the months where they were launched at, you saw similar reports. So this year, like in March, I think the reason we saw these numbers so high is because people were just seeing SpaceX. And you're right, Henry, they may have been outside on the deck. They may have been doing something outside just to give themselves a break. And they noticed this thing because it stood out as being so highly unusual. Because who would think if you look in the sky and see like 20 or 30 or 40 objects moving in a string across the sky? There'd be satellites. And when I pulled the numbers across the country, we had 672 reports in March, of which 275 have been completed and are termed as identified flying objects, man-made. And when you look at the descriptions, they're all going back to that same series of satellites. So all that increase is pretty much related back to Elon Musk and SpaceX. And I think we'll see probably the numbers being relatively the same. But one of the things I noticed out in like my neighborhood, we don't see a whole lot of people out right now. It almost reminds me of one of those bad B movies of how the streets are all deserted. Seriously, everybody's staying inside. You don't hear a whole lot of activity outside. I don't know about you, but I used to hear like the traffic, everybody going to work in the morning.
Right.
Now we don't hear that in my neighborhood. The only thing we have is the occasional dog walker. But in certain parts of the state, I think now we're seeing the breaks in the weather. Here in Ohio, we'll see the numbers of reports going up again. And also with some of the shows coming out, the newer shows coming out on UFOs, we'll probably see an increase too, because when you see the UFO shows come out, that gets that word out to the public again. And they turned us. Matter of fact, last night I had a phone call at like 11:30 last night. A guy reporting some objects that he was seeing that I'm working on now in southern Ohio.
Interesting.
Southern Ohio.
So,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just that. It's the lack of other pollution as well. India is stating that people can see the Himalayas for the first time in 20, 30 years. So, I mean, there's not a lot of dirty cloud cover.
No, and I haven't pulled the numbers from all over the world, but like you say, places like India, going back to places in China, you've got such a change in the atmosphere. People are going to notice more things in the sky. Here where I'm at, it's not that much different right now. But again, we're coming out of a time of year where the skies are pretty much overcast most of the time. And now we've just hit a couple good days of like nice sunny sky or clear sunny skies. And I'm sure we'll be seeing reports come in at night again.
Well, there's a lot of celestial events happening right now, too, where you have, I think it's the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus all lining up.
Right.
And we have that comet coming.
Correct.
Which is going to be...
That was some of the things I know. I started looking at some of those on there, Barbara, as some of the possibilities for the video I got last night. But it was just too bright of an object. I mean, it was extremely bright, and it was visible for about an hour. And it doesn't appear to be related to a star, so I'm just checking out everything else it could potentially be right now. But, yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the other celestial objects.
You say you saw this last night?
A witness called me up about 11:30 last night and says, "Is this MUFON? Is this MUFON?" I said, "Yes." And of course, I was bleary-eyed because I just fell asleep. And he says, "Well, I saw this object. It was visible for about an hour." Really? You know, and he told me where he was at. And it's, like I said, it's down in southern Ohio. I won't give the exact location because the case is under investigation right now. Southern Ohio, and it was a relatively stationary object, but it was exceptionally bright, too bright to be basically a star. And I want to go back and check out everything in more detail, because he said he didn't see aircraft flying over the region, but yet I did find a helicopter going overhead at about 900 feet, but that wouldn't account for the hour time frame that he said he saw. And I've got to look at the videos too. He sent me 3 different videos of the object. Yeah, so I wanted to see what those look like. But it looks like it may be an interesting case.
Well, now, as
Hopefully
starts getting dark again, do you think you'll still see it again tonight?
Well, that would be the first thing, because I've had witnesses like that who say, well, it came back again tonight, too. And sometimes you have witnesses who, I don't want to say they're making things up, but they get so caught up in it. One of them actually said it was summoning him back outside every night to see the same object, and coincidentally, Venus was exactly where he was looking at. But sometimes, people get really into this, and again, I appreciate the reports. And sometimes you have to be very honest with them and say, I think you're seeing Venus, and point it out to them. And I try to do it in a very nice way. But some people, they really get wrapped up into it. And I mean that they're not looking at it optimistically, that they may be seeing something else. Like I had a case in Canada where the individual said, I'm seeing this flashing light at night. And he sent me this video. Well, what I did, Henry, is I pulled up a flight chart. And the flight chart of his region actually shows me towers, cell phone towers in the area. And he was looking exactly at a cell phone tower. And that's what he sent me a picture of. And this guy, he went completely off on me because he says it was not a cell phone tower. Yet he sends me like a 3 or 5 minute video of this flashing light that's flashing like once every second. And when you do the math behind it, what it is, I put myself exactly in his position. You look at the angle above the horizon the light is, and then when you go back and you take the distance from his point to the cell phone tower, and you add in the height of the cell phone tower to it and do some trig, that's exactly what he was looking at. And the other thing that goes along with that is, if it wasn't the cell phone tower, where was the cell phone tower at in this photo then? Because it also had to be visible if there's two separate objects. But sometimes you run into that, not a whole lot, but on occasion you do.
Now, you were saying that they were sending up and letting out satellites from a rocket.
Right.
How often are they doing this, and what area has he done it already, or what areas will he be doing it in? Well,
they're launching 60 at a time every month. They've done this now, like the last 5 months in a row now, they've launched like 60 at a time. So they've got about 300 to 360 satellites up there right now. And their path varies some. They're relatively in the same path, but as they're up there longer, what they do is they go out to a higher orbit, and they space themselves out more than what they are when they're first deployed. So the path, you can't say they're exactly in the same position coming across the sky every night. One of the websites you can find it at, there's a website called Heavens Above. And Heavens Above, actually, if you go to it, you can tell the website basically where you're located at. And there's an option to see visible satellites on that given night. So I can say, like tonight, what satellites are visible. And it'll tell me what series of satellites of Starlink that's been deployed and they're visible on tonight. And the thing I like is they added a little sequence into it with the Starlink satellites that it shows you like different deployments, like deployment 6, deployment 5, deployment 4. You can select the different ones. And the higher numbers should be the more recent deployments, which would be lower and more visible. I know that's one of the things I want to watch for one of these nights when I get a chance. I was out one night, but it was a little bit too overcast to see them. But tonight, maybe as we're doing the show, I'll be able to look out and see some of them. They're going to be coming across the sky. I think it was from like the west area, roughly. And they may be going up to about 71 degrees above the horizon.
Now,
So I'd have to pull
do
it.
they have blinking lights on them?
No, these are just solid lights.
Oh,
And
they're solid lights.
the best way to describe it is it looks almost like a railroad train going across the sky.
Wow.
A series of lights, one right after the other one.
Wow, and they're all lit up. Well, that ought
Yeah,
to be
Well, I guess
interesting.
they're using electricity because they have their own conductor then.
Oh.
Yeah, they've got actually arrays on them, solar cells, to power these things.
Okay, well, that fell on its face. Okay, no.
No, I understand what Jeff was saying. Conductor.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Henry got it. All right, cool.
Well, I'm a little bit slow tonight. Bear with me.
You said it looked like a train, and I made a conductor reference. And
Yeah. Well, I remember I was getting a report last night. It's not as bad as one. I got one at 3 o'clock one morning. Somebody called me up. And the worst part was that they called a friend of mine first, and he says, "Why don't you call Tom?"
Oh, nice.
So the guy calls me up at 3 in the morning. And yeah, well, this is another one too, Jeffrey, that, I mean, I appreciate the reports coming in. And the guy says, well, I want you to know I'm an amateur pilot, and I see this object has been visible for like over an hour in one area of the sky. So as he's talking, I pull up my star chart. And exactly where he's looking at is an extremely bright star. And I says, "Is it visible there right now?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "How many degrees above the horizon?" And he gives me that. What direction? He gives me that. And that's the only thing in the sky right there is that star. And I said, "I think you're looking at a star." He goes, "Wow, I'm an amateur pilot." And I hate to say it, but the first words that went through my mouth is, "And I know why you're an amateur pilot right now."
Oh!
I didn't say it, but that was what went through my mind. And I'm thinking, think about what you just said. I mean, come on. And it probably didn't help it was 3 o'clock in the morning either.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Did you ask him how much
But
he'd been drinking?
No. There's been a couple times I've almost asked somebody that, though. Because I did have a guy call me up the one night, gave me a report, and he says, "Well, I walked out of a bar to smoke a cigarette, and I had to say this, Henry. I said, 'Well, what time did you leave the bar?' He goes, 'Well, about 11 o'clock.' I said, 'What time did you get in the bar?' He goes, 'Oh, about 5:30. So I mean, I again appreciated him, give me the report because even though you take it a little bit with a grain of salt, in that same area where he did have a sighting, we did have a couple other very close sightings that were extremely good.
Well, didn't they say the, quote, UFO that Jimmy Carter saw was probably Venus?
I would almost suspect that. I hate to say it, but I didn't look it up. I could go back, and if I knew the exact date and time and where he was at, I could pull up just to double check it. But it's very possible. It is possible.
Barbara, I know you got questions.
Oh, I got a ton of them actually, because we were talking about the onslaught of UFO shows that are coming on, and actually there's sort of a crossover now. I was watching one of the paranormal shows this last week, and one of the people that they thought were being haunted by shadow figures, etc., the psychic on board was saying, no, actually they were aliens.
Oh?
At the foot of the bed.
I didn't see that. I didn't see that one, but I have had witnesses report that. There was a case, Barbara, I did. I'm trying to think how many years ago. About 8 years ago now, and it wasn't the United States. It was actually Canada, where a witness said that he saw basically like a shadow being in the corner of his room. He said, I'm laying in bed. He says, I look up, and in the corner of the room, I see a shadow figure appearing. Well, he even went back, and he drew up a regular hand sketch of his bedroom, showing the position of the bed, showing the positions of the windows and everything else. And he says, and I saw this being standing at the end of my bed. Well, to me, it's one thing when somebody tells you a story, but when they start creating all these drawings and everything going along with it, it's almost like something is, really setting this person off. And they're really intent about, what happened. So I reach out, I contact him, we have initial contact, I get initial story from him. And then everything goes completely dead. He won't respond, he won't do anything. Well, I took and started Googling around, and I found that his story was picked up by local newspapers in his region. Because what different ones do, like MUFON, there's a website called UFO Stalker that puts little blurbs of the reports to come in, not all the details, like the name and so forth on there. But what they do normally give is the location it happened at, the date, the time, and some very brief descriptions of the event.
Almost like the UFO version of the old police blotter in the newspapers.
Exactly. And it came out, and when it hit the news, I can just picture him like, oh man, this guy probably saw it hit the newspapers, and he's like, I want to remain anonymous. I don't want information out. So he just broke off contact. Well, me, I'm kind of persistent. I'm like, man, why is this guy not contacting me? So I start using different resources. This is when you start going into things like social media, and you put the person's name in like Facebook. And another thing I did on there, Jeffrey, is I went to LinkedIn, and I put their name in LinkedIn, and I found this person's name. Not saying it's the exact same person, but a person by this name in this smaller town that had a very high profile position in that town.
Yeah. Can't let that reputation go down.
In education. Yeah. And I'm like, this would not go over well with his position, most likely. Yeah. So he broke off all contact and refused to answer me. But when, we had this discussions, I'm like, this guy really sounds like he, had some encounter. I have no idea what it is, but this is inside the house. And like you say, Barbara, it's that crossover. When does it become an alien and when is it paranormal on the inside, or is it all one and the same? And this is one of those that, I really wanted to dig into it deeper. But unfortunately, the contact was gone. And then what didn't help was you get sometimes copycat people. I had two other people from the same region within about 40 to 50 miles send me reports that had photographs of aliens. One was an alien in their room, which was interesting because when I went back and enhanced the digital photographs they sent to me, it really looked like a Halloween costume you could find on eBay or Amazon. Yeah, it was basically a Halloween costume. I'm beyond a shadow of a doubt that's what it was. And when I brought that up to the person, then next thing you know, they this type of stuttering and thing, and then that was it. They were out. They knew they'd been busted. And there was a second one who had used a phone app to put an image of a gray alien in a photograph. And that one also came up, but those were copycat images because they were within the range where that newspaper, when it was sold, it was being read. And the story got around in that region, so they just kind of piggybacked on it.
Yeah, they wanted their
So
moment in the glory, right?
Yeah, so unfortunately, you had one really, really good case, what appeared to be, a fantastic one, and it was kind of messed up because the story got out. Too bad it couldn't just completely remain silent.
Did you ever try and contact him privately?
I did, and it got nowhere.
Oh.
I had phone numbers, identified who I was. I went through the email, and the same ones I used for all my initial contacts, and there was no response after that.
Wow.
And I really do believe it was because of his position, which, coming from education myself for a number of years, I could relate to. When you're in a position that he was in, you wouldn't want it public.
Right.
That you saw an alien in your bedroom. You know?
Well, Patsy seen something one night in the bedroom. She said she was laying in bed looking up in the corner of the ceiling, and it kind of opened up, and a head bent down and looked at her, and then raised back up and was gone. So she said she thinks that was a alien kind of checking on her, I guess. I don't know. I didn't see it. So
I've heard of similar things, and I've been one too who's seen kind of like, as it would term, of shadow people in a corner of the room. That I look up and I see this dark shape kind of moving, and I look and I do the double take, I do the triple take. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's because I don't have my glasses on, and you put the glasses on and everything remains the same, But I've had things like that going clear back to the 1960s that I've seen. Yeah.
So there's actually an alien app now for the phone?
Yes.
Wow.
And when I was doing the analysis of it, I could see that the image was altered. And I just was really blunt with him. I said, I got a question. I said, are you enhancing this image with Photoshop or an app or something like that? And their response came back, Barbara, I don't know anything about Photoshop. Well, you didn't answer the whole question. I said, Photoshop or a phone app. I don't know anything about Photoshop, but he didn't say anything about the app. And I couldn't find the exact same image on the app, but it was pretty much, I guess you could say, a typical type of a gray alien. That, I don't know where they got it at, but it had to come from someplace. And interesting enough, the image wasn't very far from the Halloween costume in the one other individual's photograph.
So one of the app called Alien UFO Photo Editor Prank Pictures?
I'd have to look it up. I'd have to look it up, Jeffrey. I don't know. I'd have to go back and double check it. But it was one of the first times I'd had the images come in like that. But it was interesting that here you've got the original report from a good witness. And then within 2 days, here these other pictures come in. And that's...
Well, these look kind of amateurish. I mean, there's one of a UFO hovering over like an oceanscape, but I find it interesting that they have xenomorphs sky surfing.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, Patsy...
Well, we used to do that, too, with people saying that they have pictures with ghosts in them, and then you go back and there's dozens of ghost apps now. But you can almost always find them. Almost always find them.
Oh. Well, see, Barbara, going back, I used to do amateur photography where I had my own developing equipment. I did color, I did black and white back in the 1960s. And interesting enough, one of the things I did, Henry, is I was faking my own UFO photos.
Good old double exposure.
Yeah. Double exposure. And I remember doing crazy things. Like one of the ones I was really proud of is I had a picture of it was actually my high school I graduated from. I thought, I'd like to put a UFO above this somehow. And I was in the house, and I looked over, and I saw a blender in the kitchen. I thought, wait a minute. I grabbed the lid off of the blender, the top, and I put some tape around the edges of it to kind of make it look a little bit different. And from an angle, I took a photograph and graphed it in. I was actually pretty proud of that for the 1960s. It looked really good. Now, you would have picked it up in a heartbeat if you did an analysis on it. But I remember doing another number of photographs back then, but I was even trying to hoax my own.
Oh, so it would have come out looking like the tripods from War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
Cool.
It looked really good, though. I mean, it didn't look like a blender lid at all once I was done with it, but it was kind of cool. Huh. I was proud of that one.
It almost sounds like they have the press conference in Close Encounters where the general shows a photo saying, this is a flying saucer. And everyone's like, yeah, that's the one I saw. He says, it's made of pewter and thrown across the yard by my 10-year-old child,
Yep. That's it. And I never did tell anybody, though. I showed some of the pictures around and kind of gave the story behind it and never told anybody what I did. I just wanted to see what reaction I got back then, I guess.
Wow. Well, was there a lot of talk about the UFOs and aliens, I guess, back then?
More people were reserved. Now, when I talk to people, actually, most people are fairly receptive of it. I mean, it's amazing the change, because back in the 60s, everybody's pretty much quiet. If you saw stuff come up about UFOs, most of the time they looked at the person like they were nuts. Now, when I talk to somebody, most of the people I talk to say, hey, I think it is possible there's something out there. So, I mean, it's a major, major, major change from what it used to be.
Well, now, back then, were you having visions of where you had been abducted, or was this before you started realizing that?
Well, I never really kind of put two and two together. I just remember all these weird events happening back in the 1960s where I had like the sleep paralysis, missing time, these basically fears that something was coming to take me each night. And the regressions years later tended to, reaffirm that. I shouldn't say really tended, that's what they indicated, is that was happening at that time. But back then, I never really put two and two together. Like the story I've told you before about seeing a UFO hovering over me and a buddy, I never told him about it. And to me, I remembered the incident, but I never really looked solidly at putting two and two together until years later. And then I said, okay, maybe that's what happened, and let's go back and revisit it when we did the regressions. And that's what it pointed to.
Wow. Okay, Barbara.
Yes.
I know you got more.
Oh, yeah, because I want to discuss the elephant in the room. And that is the new show that came on, I think it's the History Channel, called The Secrets of Skywalker Ranch, or Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker, yeah.
Yeah, Skywalker is a completely different.
Right.
Skinwalker Ranch, yeah. It's getting fascinating.
When you said elephant in the room, you had me worried there for a minute, because I think I put on some weight since we've had this. Since we've had to stay indoors a lot. But anyway, I was hoping you were going to bring up Skinwalker Ranch, because that was one of the things I forgot about the show to begin with when it came on a couple weeks ago, because Project Blue Book, the series ended, and I saw the previews for Skinwalker Ranch. I'm like, where are they going to go with this? Because I've got knowledge of some background on that whole thing. And I wondered how they were going to be presenting all these events with Skinwalker Ranch compared to what's come out, and maybe what are they going to add into it? Something new, or are they going to take and really go out in left field and really start exaggerating stuff? Well, for those that don't know, Skinwalker Ranch is only one, by the way, of places like this around the country. I've heard that there's roughly about 7 or so places across the U.S. that are similar to Skinwalker Ranch. And Skinwalker Ranch, by the way, is out in Utah. It started becoming known back around the 1970s, something like that. And it first started becoming more publicized back in like the late 1990s. George Knapp, who's out of the Las Vegas area, started talking about it. There is a book that came out about the Skinwalker Ranch. And what they did is they went into the history of this ranch. And this ranch, there's Indian lore that's associated with it. And I'm always curious about that because is there something related to the Indian culture and the things that they experienced that's just not kind of like the medicine man type stuff that's a lot of fact to it. I've gone back and done some crop circle investigations around these areas where Indian mounds are at. And I'm just really wondering what connection there may be to, stuff like that. Well, back in, it had to be back in like the 1800s. You had the Indians out there, the Navajos and the Utes. Well, there was bad blood between them because in this case, I believe it was the Utes were basically having some of the Navajo turned over for like slaves to different ones out there. And what happened is the Navajos then reportedly put a curse on that region. And I hope I didn't get the Indian cultures backwards, but the Navajos put a curse on that region. And the Skinwalker is basically, it's not a medicine man. It's a spirit that's like a shapeshifter. And it can travel the region. Well, in this ranch called Skinwalker Ranch, there's been stories that's come out of beast that look, in this case, something like wolves, beasts that change shapes. And these stories have come out over the years. Well, there was a rancher that had that region out there that owned the ranch, and they had stories about a large wolf coming out of the region. This wolf comes down, you see it looking at a pen, and there was like a cow or something inside the pen, and this wolf reaches in, grabs it, and tries to pull it out through the pen. A couple of the individuals who had the ranch were there. One was a boy who'd actually been petting this wolf like it was a dog, and it wasn't aggressive at all, but when it reached out and grabbed this livestock, it was like trying to kill it. Well, the father shoots the wolf-like creature with a high-powered pistol. It doesn't go down. It walks away. He gets a high-powered rifle, hits it again, a 30-06, and it still doesn't go down. And they find like blood trails that go out to nowhere, and they can't find it. It just totally disappears. That same family had a special breed of cattle that they were raising, and the next thing you know, the cattle starts getting mutilated and starts getting killed off. They also see UFOs in the region, orbs around the area. They hear voices on their barber coming out of nowhere. And these voices are like calling to them, talking to them. And they say they're very clear. Well, the family started getting so freaked out, and especially at one incident where they saw, like on this hill, some red eyes looking down at them from like a hill, that they couldn't see an outline of a creature, but he'd see these large red eyes looking at him. They got so freaked out that they sold the ranch. And who they sold the ranch to but Robert Bigelow. Now here's the UFO connection. Robert Bigelow owns Bigelow Aerospace. Robert Bigelow back in the 1990s also had an institute called the National Institute of Discovery Science, where he was researching into the paranormal. He had his own team of researchers. What they did is they even set up an encampment out at Skinwalker Ranch, of where they put up barricades. They blocked it off so people could get in, because it was becoming more, people were becoming more aware of it by the internet. And people were going out there like ghost hunters and different ones trying to get on the ranch. Well, they set up blockades. They were not specific in what type of instruments they set up, but they were setting up instruments in an attempt to, identify what these activities were that were going on. And he owned this ranch for a number of years. Also, this is the same individual who got money from the government for UFO research through the program called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And even before it was called ATIP, it was actually another name relating back to weapons, but some of the monies were being used to investigate the paranormal. And the reason they changed the name over to ATIP, the way I understand it, was because it was getting out that money was being spent to investigate paranormal. And they thought, we don't want the public to know that we're paying money for ghost hunters, basically. So they changed the name of the program. Well, Bigelow ran this program. He's never really released what his teams have uncovered, which I've always wondered. I mean, if he had the ranch for, let's say, 8 to 10 years, and you're out there with, let's say, camera systems put up, you're out there with individuals, let's say even just security people on the grounds. Those security people, if there's as much unusual activity as what they're talking about, they had to see things. They had to experience things. Well, then all of a sudden, it comes out that the ranch was now sold. Initially, they didn't say who it was other than just a shell company's name. And it came out back in March of this year that the individual who bought it, his name is Brandon Fugel, who's a Utah real estate tycoon. He went back. They also put up barricades, but then he started doing his own research into that area. He's got much more aggressive. And the thing I wondered, Barbara, is, compared to what was seen on TV the other night, what did they really do behind the scenes, that they're not talking about because maybe they think that it may be boring and so forth on there, that the public may not be interested. Well, they showed a control room that they put up. And in their control room, I saw the monitors that they had.
Right.
And when I do my research, one thing I want to do is I want to eliminate the known. Let's get rid of the known things right away. And let's look at things from multiple avenues. Let's just don't say, okay, it doesn't look like it's an airplane, and let's eliminate everything else. Don't look at anything else. They're looking at all the different areas because they want to really scrub down and get data. Well, on the monitors, one of the things they had was a system where they're monitoring flight traffic. One of the things I do is there's a website called Flight Radar 24 that allows me to have access to aircraft with transponders. I've got a system in my office. I can pull up historical documents regarding flight paths going back to 2 years. And that's what I was doing on there, Henry, when earlier, right at the beginning of the show, the witness that told me he had an experience in southern Ohio, I was going back and pulling up flight data for that region of the state and see what was flying over that region. The disadvantage about that, though, is some stuff is filtered out. For example, like military. I have a receiver in my office that I can pick up signals from aircraft of certain frequencies that have transponders of certain frequencies. I can pick those up, and when the signal leaves my house, basically, it can be filtered out by the organizations putting it on the internet. So they can say, okay, let's let them see commercial air traffic, but they can't see military. Well, what they did on Skinwalker Ranch, the group that they put up the command center, is their system doesn't rely on that. They've got their own receivers, and they're monitoring the same bands that most air traffic uses. And that goes back to commercial, private, and military. They're monitoring all of that as much as possible. So they're monitoring unfiltered information, which is good. I like that aspect of what they're doing. The other thing they've got is they're monitoring radio frequencies in the area. I don't know about you, Barbara. When I was watching the show the other day, I saw them walking around with meters. And like I do, the different paranormal shows show people walking around with different meters, and they say, look, I got red lights. But what does it mean? What do the red lights really mean other than normally you think of, uh-oh? Well, they're talking about getting signals, like radio signals.
Right.
And that some of these signals, they said, were intense enough to potentially cause damage.
Right.
Well, the thing that they didn't tell me is, okay, tell me what frequencies all these signals are coming in on. Because when you see different frequencies, you may be able to associate with them with different things in the region. This is one of the things that they were, to me, missing. Mm-hmm. They weren't telling us that, but then again, that might have bored most people out there, so other than me. But it would have told me, do they have some sort of transmitters in the area? Now, it is a more remote area, but south of where they're at, there are a lot of oil wells, and maybe they've got transmitters around that region transmitting stuff back on a periodic basis. That's not a regular set time frame. It just transmits periodically that they may be picking up. But I'd like to know more about that, what frequencies they were. But there is some other things they had, like they had their cameras set up that have live feeds from all over the place. And the way they sounded, Bigelow didn't have anything like that set up. Their control room was way beyond what he had. So here the control room is monitoring on camera different areas of that ranch, and it's roughly about a 550-acre ranch. So what they look at is if they get, let's say, a radio signal spike, one of the things they looked at is the frequency, and one of the comments I saw was one of the signals they got wasn't just over like a narrow width. It was actually over a very, very broad width of frequencies that was unusual. And when they saw this spike, the thing they also wanted to look for is, okay, can they determine what direction that signal's coming from? Are they picking the information up on cameras at the same time? And, let's look at this thing from multiple areas to see if we can isolate, this thing. Let's see if we can get like 2 or 3 different ways of data confirming that something happened. I like that aspect of what they're doing. Now, the one thing that got me, though, and I wanted to be with them, by the way. I wanted to go out there. And if they're listening, by the way, you can get my phone number from Henry. Give me a call.
I would
right
do
now,
that only if I get to go.
Coronavirus situation. What's that?
I said I would do that only if I get to go.
Yeah. And due to this whole coronavirus situation, I'm willing to travel. and I'd even consider driving out because gas prices are so cheap right now.
Yes.
And I'd even pay for the gas. But one of the things that got me, though, is when they're talking about these frequencies and the unusual activities, like on one of the episodes, the second episode, they had their meters out, and they're looking for not only radio frequencies, but they're also looking for magnetic effects.
Right.
That's another area that we look for also, by the way, in UFOs. Is there magnetic activity? And one of the individuals who's doing a lot of research in this area, his name is Fran Ridge. He was with NICAP, which is an older UFO organization. One of the things he's been developing for years is basically it's a UFO detector. And I remember back in the early days, like when I saw these things like in the 1960s coming out, they were looking for magnetic activities. But he's taken that to a much higher level now, where he's using a little device called, basically it's a BlackBerry Pi, which is a little small computer that you can get for like $30-some, something like that. I've got some myself. And you can attach instruments to this. And what he's done is they've got software written that it looks for magnetic anomalies in a region So if it detects magnetic anomalies, what they do is they say, okay, let's compare data now. We've got magnetic anomalies we're picking up here. Are people seeing UFOs in the same region? So let's see if they correlate. And then if you've got also more of these units, and the idea is they want to put a lot more of these units out there. Now you can triangulate things because, okay, this one picks up a strong signal, this one's a little bit weaker. Okay, this one picks up a signal strength up here. So you can more identify where exactly this magnetic anomaly is coming from. And then go back and compare it to reports again. Well, when I see Skinwalker Ranch, they're going out there also with basically EMF detectors, looking for changes in magnetic frequency. One of the areas that they were checking out was almost like, I don't want to say a cave, but it was basically you're looking down into not a pit, but I guess best term is like a cave-like structure, straight down in. There was enough to house like 3 to 4 people, and one of the individuals involved, he gets down in there and he starts feeling lightheaded. He starts feeling out of sorts, and they get him out of there right away. Because there's been reports on Skinwalker Ranch of effects like this in certain regions. One of the individuals that is on the ranch a lot more developed basically like water on the brain, basically water between the skin and the skull. And it started swelling way up, and they had to hospitalize him at one time. Mm-hmm. So, checking out the connection. Can there be a connection? That's why, like you, Henry, I'd like to go out there and find out.
But it was interesting, at the same time that he was having those effects, nobody was reading anything. The air was fine. There was no electromagnetic field that they could detect. There was no radiation that they could detect. It was just him feeling weak in the knees and shaky.
Well, and this is where you're looking for that correlating information. But the thing is maybe what's affecting him isn't related to any or all the above. Maybe it's directed. Or it's directed because, and this is what was crazy, Barbara. I was sitting in my living room the other night watching that. And, we've talked in the past about my own experiences on there and how I've had these feelings on certain events. When I do certain cases, sometimes I have this feeling before I even really start talking to the witness that something happened. I've had situations where I've been able to see what happened to the witness before they even describe it. And this is the scary part. I'm seeing everything in my mind that they describe later on. I mean, they didn't write anything down in text earlier. These are things that they went off and described in much more detail than what was in their report. And I've seen all that before they even described it. When I was watching the show the other night, I had a similar feeling before he even got down in there. I said, he's going to get down in there. I just feel something unusual is going to happen to him. And I just had this sense running through my body that something was off about that area. I don't know what it was, because that hole that he climbed down into, he also said it had an opening going much deeper down underground. Right. They could feel air coming out of it. Now, they said that they couldn't detect like a loss of oxygen that would be associated to the lightheadedness, but who knows what else could be coming out.
And they also said that the air was almost air conditioned.
Right.
Which I found really interesting.
Yeah, so that was, to me, that really got me interested when they were down in that area. And I really want to check that. I was really trying to vision myself walking around that ranch. Because before the show, I was looking over some stuff on Skinwalker Ranch. And it's easy to find on the internet. All I have to do is just basically type in Skinwalker Ranch. And it takes you out under the Shell Corporation's name, which is like Antiminium is the Shell Corporation's name. You can take it and go out there and you can kind of like get a visual view of the whole thing. And I was basically scanning around trying to see all the locations that they were at. And I was really trying to find out if there's anything around there that has, let's say, transmitters of any sort, high-powered transmitters, which they're saying there wasn't. And I didn't see, by the way, any towers, like cell phone towers or anything like that, close to where they were when I did my check. There were some airports around there, some smaller airports. I didn't find anything that seemed to stand out there. But I'd really love to dig more into that whole thing. But I wonder, here's this new guy taking over. I wonder, first of all, if Bigelow had the ranch for, I don't know, it was 8 or 10 years or more. Had to be more than 10 years. What prompted him, number one, to sell it?
Well, what was he doing on the ranch to start with?
Research. Well, he was looking at, research. He was looking at the paranormal activities. He'd heard about all this paranormal activity, and he was, Bigelow, one of his connections was Harry Reid, who is in the Senate out in Nevada. He was friends with, got to be friends with Bigelow. Also, Colm Kelleher wrote a book on the Skinwalker Ranch. And that was another connection that Bigelow developed in also, because Bigelow took Colm Kelleher into his institute, National Discovery Science. So they've got that connection. That connection, by the way, also carried over, excuse me, to the stuff they did later on for the government with ATIP. So it's kind of like, I guess you could say, a good old boys network that was gradually being formed. That you had these people getting together, but nonetheless, he's been interested in the paranormal. Bigelow also, by the way, has had his own UFO sightings. And I believe it was his mother also had UFO sightings going back. He is a very, very, very big believer in UFOs. And he's kind of skirts the issue when they ask him publicly about certain details. But he says, I'm definitely a believer, and I've probably spent more money in the United States of any private individual you're going to find on researching UFOs. And he's probably right. But he was very interested in the paranormal, but I'm like, why would you basically say, okay, I'm done with the ranch now and sell it if there's something there? It just makes me think of one of a couple things. Either he got to a point that he didn't think that was producing the results that he was looking for, and he decided to move on and reinvest his money someplace else. When he had his National Institute of Discovery Science, he closed that down before he got involved with the government back in 2004, 2007. He closed that program down because he didn't think that was producing enough results. But then again, maybe the techniques he was using weren't really turning up the right results. Like in this case, if this new group comes in, they put all these cameras out, they put all this electronic equipment out, and they look at things differently, maybe really getting a different group of people in. One of the guys that's on the show on there, Barbara, does have a very, he's got an engineering background. And I've seen him do a couple other shows, I think it was. But he seems like he's very grounded. And maybe, this new team that's in there is finding something enough to keep them digging deeper. I'm just hoping it's just not a show that's being created, just to put a show out there for ratings and to make a few bucks off of it.
Well, I don't know what benefit that would have for the owner to have them out there, quite frankly. No,
I don't either, Barbara. That's the thing. I mean, I can't see him getting rich off of anything like this. No.
Unless it becomes a tourist place, but I sincerely doubt that'll happen either.
No, I doubt that'll happen.
But speaking of digging, I find it interesting that they're not going to allow that. And why nobody, even when they were up there, supposedly the hillside was illuminated, why nobody bothered to take soil samples unless, again, it just was off air.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. I didn't find anything on the research I did after the other night's show on soil samples, if they'd been collected, if they'd been digging. Now, the show promoted the fact about digging in one of the preview episodes before the series began. So they may be leading up to actually taking samples down the road, but again, it goes back to the Indian lore again, that not to disturb the soil, because if you do, bad things will happen. And one of the individuals who's been out there on the ranch stated that he'd done some things, but then he'd had bad things happen right away. He got sick, and like the swelling on the brain scared him enough that he was going to die. And he's basically backed off from it. Mm-hmm. There's been some other stories that's come out that when individuals were walking around the ranch, even if the new team, that they're hearing voices now come out of nowhere, telling them to leave now, get out of here. And they do it. They don't waste time. They just get out. But they said there's nobody around. And they just have this feeling that, somebody is warning them to get the heck out of there. Yeah. So this is where I'm really curious about the Indian lore. Now, Henry, I'm willing to let you take the first shovelful, if you like.
All right, we're going to talk about that when we come back. So we're going to go ahead and take us a quick break. And I think I'll let Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. We're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with your host, Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould. And tonight's always excellent, wonderful guest, Thomas Wertman. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for listening tonight with us here in the chat room, and those from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we've got a great show going on tonight. And speaking from around the world, Barbara, where do we have listeners?
Henry, tonight they're coming in from all over the United States, Britain, Canada, Spain, wow, Malta, and did I say Canada?
Yeah.
It's in there too.
Wow, Malta.
Malta.
I don't remember us having Malta in there.
Nope.
We have once or twice.
Once or twice? Wow.
For a while, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we got Barbara Duncan with us.
Still here.
Okay. And we got Jeffrey Gould.
I'm still connected.
And I'm going to bring back our guest, Thomas Wertman.
I'm still here. And by the way, Henry, I am letting you take the first shovelful because I just want to make a cup of coffee. And if this is any sign, the cup of coffee my Keurig machine started regurgitating all over the floor. I'm like, this is bad juju. I'm letting Henry definitely go first.
Well, that's one of the questions that I was going to ask to start with. They say that there's not supposed to be any digging. But if you've noticed, there's fences up, so they had to dig holes for that. I'm sure they have wells. There's telephone poles where they got lines coming into the ranch. So how's come a lot of stuff hasn't happened, these people digging those holes?
Good question. That was one of the things I wondered, because when I pulled up the map of the region, I looked at not only like Google Earth, but I looked at, again, my flight tracking maps. And interestingly enough, my flight tracking map shows an area marked ranch, pretty much exactly where Skinwalker Ranch is. I'm like, that's interesting. But they also have marked on an area just south of there, not that far, by the way, all these oil wells. If you go south of there, probably, Henry, maybe 20 miles, if that even, you've got all these oil wells all over the place. And it's like, if there's this, Navajo, in this case, curses, could it be defined to just like that local region, or could it really extend farther? And why wouldn't it affect maybe where they drill those oil wells at then? And that'd be a good question. And you're right. They've got ranches to ranch that have to drill for water. There are also, if you looked at the TV show, I don't know if you noticed what I did. I could see lights off at a distance. And one of the things I did is I'm like, where are those lights coming from? Well, I approximated the angle they were looking at, and there were other ranches a few miles away, maybe 5 miles away or so. And I'm like, wouldn't they be affected also? Why just that one little small isolated area? I don't know. Maybe there is something super, super special about that little area. One of the individuals I was talking to back a number of years ago told me there was roughly, maybe about 7 areas around the country like Skinwalker Ranch. There was one like this one out in Utah. There's another reportedly someplace in Pennsylvania, which he didn't say exactly where. There was another one that he was working on down in the Missouri area. This one was called Marley Woods. His name was Ted Phillips. Ted passed away early this year. But Ted goes back to the old early days of UFOs and paranormal, back to the old days of In Search of Leonard Nimoy. And he was also I guess you could say, an understudy of Alan Hynek. He worked with Alan in those early days. And I remember talking to Ted one time, and he was talking about being on this Marley Woods area and seeing orbs off in a distance. He said you'd see these orbs traveling across the fields off in a distance, and one night in particular, he just saw these orbs all over, just moving everywhere in this one region, and he had his camera in his hand, and he's got the camera on, he's filming the ground because he forgot to raise the camera. He was so awestruck by seeing the lights. And I could just picture, really that happening, that you're seeing something you just can't believe that's going on, and he kind of, you lose focus. But going back to the drilling, hopefully they're going to answer that question down the road, or they'll try drilling in this case on their Henry down the road. But I don't know why the other areas around that region wouldn't be affected. I mean, even maybe 20, 30 miles from there's pumping stations and stuff for oil. So there's got to be all these things around there where there's been drilling.
Right. But also, you wouldn't even have to drill. You go back to that same little crevice that they were in, and you drop a probe down that hole.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I thought of right away, is why don't you take something like a fiber optic cable, something along those lines, and extend it down through that hole and see if you see the source of where that air is rushing from, that they feel almost like that air conditioning. That's one of the things I would have done. I would have gone farther than what they did. You may not be able to get anything like a little small drone down in the hole, but fiber optic cable, something like that, you should be able to. And also even doing something maybe simple like putting pieces of PVC pipe together to give it more rigidity. You assemble it piece after piece, almost like somebody's drilling with the camera attached to take it down and deeper. I don't know why they didn't do that part. Maybe that's just the difference in me. I'd want to go maybe a lot farther than what they did. And it really wouldn't cost that much money to do that if you think about it, to take something along those lines. Well,
I know they, on Oak Island, they use a lot of ground-penetrating radar. They could use something like that.
The only limitation about that would be in the region where they're at is just how rocky it is. With the ground-penetrating radar, they need something relatively flat to go across. Something that's got, their units normally have wheels on them.
Right.
And it'd be extremely difficult to train, but where the ranches and stuff are at, that they could potentially do, where you've got flatter land out, because it's like a bluff that goes up, ridge line on the north side of the ranch that extends for quite a ways. That's where they're at when they went to like the cave-like structure. But the areas that they called the ranch and the second ranch, those were on flatter areas. So that they could do there, I would think, with no problem. But the ones that do the Oak Island series, to me, that's a well-produced series. Very well-produced. And you can see over the years in there, Henry, how they've gone like step by step farther and farther. So I don't know, maybe the ones who put this show together so far, they're starting with baby steps, and maybe they'll go farther. And hopefully, maybe they're looking at getting an Oak Island series going on for like 8 years, something like that. And in 8 years, think about this: they found a cross, they found some wood, but they're still looking for the money pit.
The main thing, yes.
That's right.
Think of all the money that they've used to have that big drilling equipment come in. Now,
I know.
I seriously doubt if they spent that much on Skinwalker.
No. Right now, since this show is kind of like its first season, it's just kind of like, I think, baby steps. Where, okay, we've got this room set up, we've got some 55-inch monitors in there, and if you think about it, you can buy 55-inch TV monitors now fairly cheap.
Yeah.
They've got some software and stuff in there. They've got their camera setups. But it's not like you say, it's not like they've brought in who knows how many $100,000 digging equipment. One time, much less multiple times.
Well, I think that's
also
the new owner. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was saying, I think it's the new owner who's also the millionaire who's funding that aspect. The show itself, I think, are just a few cameramen off to the side making it look like a found footage documentary or so.
Yeah, he's the one that's funding stuff. And what I saw is he's got, I guess, a fair amount of money. I don't know exactly how much.
It's like a CEO or something.
Well, he owns his own like real estate group in the real estate. And they said that one of the people that came in and interviewed him was like Vice, one of the websites. They came in to do a thing on the ranch, and they were flown in on his own private helicopter.
Nice.
So he flew him in his own helicopter. They did the tour around the ranch, the whole 9 yards, and they could see that he's got some money behind him. But the thing about the Oak Island guys is they also pulled in a lot of resources, I think, that want to get their name out there. And you've got these other groups just kind of like jumping on board with the digging equipment, the ones putting the cores in, the ones doing the analysis of the materials. So they've got a lot of other people, but I guess you could say if this show probably catches on and they go into like season 2, season 3, they'll probably start extending the same way. Because they'll say, look, we've been on 3 years now. We want to get some more expertise in. And I could see more people jumping on board then.
Throwing more money into it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and which one's going to be brave enough to dig?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's an interesting show. So far, when I've seen, it's not bad. I'll be watching it each week.
Yeah.
And I'll be wishing, like we were joking around about, Henry, that I was out there. Because I'd also like to see what they're talking about for the UFOs, because I did find a website, Barbara, where they had a 24-hour feed, was it? But it wasn't like it's a continuous live streaming feed of the region. So they had their cameras set up and they were just like running them for 24 hours and they recorded it and put it out on YouTube. And I did see like a meteor, it looked like, came across at one point. But I'd like to be out there personally to say, okay, let me see what we can find, like in the way of UFOs. I want to take camera equipment out, set it up. They could pick up, let's say, motion, like something moving across the screen, sensitive enough, and then just record it and see what happens. I'd also like to watch their equipment too. Check out the equipment they've got, see what it looks like, see how sensitive it is, look at a bandwidth, let's look at all the above and see what other ways you could even enhance that even more. You know, I'd like to go out there.
Oh, we do have a question about George Knapp. Because he also co-wrote a book on Skinwalker. For Skinwalker with Colm.
Right, Colm Kelleher.
Yeah. So he's also doing a lot of MUFON work, I understand, or speaks with MUFON conferences. And do you think that Skinwalker warrants that kind of view? Do you think it's worth the effort to go out there, or do you think that some of this is just man-made?
That's why I would like to go out myself, because I'm one of those people that I want to put the boots on the ground myself and find out. Because you'll have different ones who can make things sound really, really great, but the skeptic side of it comes out and says, okay, let's look at things from a skeptical point of view too. And let's be hesitant. Let's just don't jump all on board and say, yeah, there's a lot of paranormal activity out there. I want to really look to see if there's a true known explanation behind some of this stuff. Because what if, when they're talking about those unusual, like radio signals popping up periodically, what if you find out that there's oil well equipment 20 miles from there that, let's say, have to send out reports every so often that let's say the equipment is just working, that there's maybe computers there that's hooked up to it of some sort that says, okay, yes, we're functioning, we turned on, and we pumped for this long, then we shut off. What if there's something along those lines that they're picking up? Now, they said that they're also picking up extremely high things, and they're going into like microwaves that could be damaging, like standing in front of a microwave with the door open.
And that was,
but again, I want to know more details of exactly what they're describing, you know, when you talk about that.
That was up on that plateau that they was getting that.
Yeah, when he talked about, okay, it was putting out enough power, it was like standing in front of a microwave oven open.
Right.
To me, it's kind of a vague comment, you know.
Well, yeah, the guy's an astrophysicist, so one would think he knew what he was talking about. So, but maybe he was trying to, play it down a little bit. Yeah,
he was one. If I remember right now, they ran a show. I forget how many years ago, Barbara, out of Alabama, where a lot of the space program stuff was being developed at, the rockets and stuff. And I'm wanting to think that's where he was at. I saw him on a show from that region where they were getting into, like, was it homemade rockets or something like that?
It could be, but he's also been on Oak Island.
Okay. I couldn't remember him from Oak Island, but I do remember him from one of the other shows.
He brought up stuff on star placements and where the stones were on the map. Yeah.
Right. I do remember that. Yeah. I got a question from the chat room, and it's from Tabby, and she wanted to know, do you think it could have been heat lightning seen at the ranch and not possible UFO activity?
That's possible, and that's why one of the things that they didn't talk about is what the weather conditions were like on that given night. That's one of the things I do when I pull my reports for UFOs. I go back and I look at weather conditions, I look for aircraft, I look for satellites, and it's just like a checklist I always go down through. And I'd want to eliminate that. And also, one of the things I wanted to see is, are there areas close enough that maybe they could have picked up some other flashing light of some sort from the region? Now, I'm not saying it is by any means, but what if you found out that there's like a beacon for an airport that would occasionally flash around through that area that they could pick up? So you want to make sure you eliminate basically all the potential knowns.
Well, when I saw the clip... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I must be a lag, because when I try and speak. When I was watching that clip, and they were like, oh, there's there's it's sort of like lightning without lightning bolts. And I'm thinking, what, you people have never heard of heat lightning? Because I grew up in New Jersey and we had heat lightning a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's where they take some, I'll just say liberties, and they kind of enhance maybe what's going on.
The Zach Baggins effect.
Yeah, and that's why probably I wouldn't make it on some of these TV shows, because I would be more blunt, It's heat lightning, dummy. Give me a freaking break. Man.
Considering they have breathing apparatus for going into caves and such, I'm surprised, they're like, he goes like, 2 feet? And you're like, oh, I feel dizzy. I'm like, seriously, 2 feet? You couldn't have gone 3 or 5 feet and now you're already dizzy? Come on. I'd be, climbing down there like a spider monkey myself. But I would prefer, like they were saying, they're surprise little toxic gases sometimes. So I'm like, just give me some kind of breathing apparatus and off I go. I'll keep in touch.
You're right. And that you didn't see done either. And
well, one thing I found with that is they were measuring oxygen levels, yes. And the oxygen levels were normal. But they weren't measuring for anything else. They didn't have a Draeger tube down there. They weren't measuring for any other known gases? I guess would be neurotoxins.
Yeah,
that
gases
would be
or anything. Yeah.
So who's got the canary?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is you've probably known somebody, and I'm not saying that the engineers like this, but some people out there that you could probably tell them over and over again and psych them right out. And they would get them to the point that the minute they start going down that hole, they're already getting symptoms of something happening when there may be nothing down there whatsoever.
You can feed suggestions into people like that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I used to have a boss like that we used to play games with once in a while, me and a buddy. And it was kind of cold, but on the other hand, it was kind of funny that we would start talking about a certain illness. And, so-and-so looks sick. Dave looks really sick, you go over and talk to Dave. Dave looks sick. I think he's been throwing up all morning long, And he goes walking over to my buddy Dave, and the boss can't see me, but I'm motioning to Dave that, like, hey, Dave, act like you're getting sick, like you're throwing up, And Dave says, man, my stomach. He starts going to stomach, and I start giving him all this body language on what to do. And we did this one day, and we realized that he started having the same symptoms that we described. And what was great about it, what was great about it from our respect is he left work. he got sick and he had to go. So this is a routine that we pulled maybe 2 or 3 times, about 3 times probably, when we wanted to get rid of him because he was being a real pain in the butt to us that day. Then we started pulling that routine, and next thing you know, an hour and a half later, he's going to the doctor. But in all seriousness, though, out of suggestion that sometimes that can become a problem. And going back to your thing earlier about George Knapp, by the way, George Knapp, they've invited him to a number of the MUFON conferences because, again, he's got his he does a news broadcast out of Las Vegas. He's very big into UFOs, Skinwalker Ranch, etc. And MUFON does like to put on individuals to talk at their conferences like that. The thing the conferences do for me is when you go out to them, it's kind of like a thing that you get to meet a lot of other people. You get to learn, get to network with people out there, social network. You get to hear a lot of stories, and you're always hoping for those stories to come out that don't come out in any book or any TV show someplace, that you hear the real stuff.
Right.
So
they used to have it used to be a cattle ranch, so they used to have a lot of cattle on there. Do they still have cattle on the ranch?
I don't know if they've got cattle out there now, but the one owner said that his cattle were dying off so much he'd lost about 30% of his stock. And this breed of cattle he had was fairly expensive, and that's why he got out, because he was losing his whole investment.
And was that from
dying off?
Was that from mutilation, kind of?
That was from dying, and then he was saying that they were mutilated. That he was one talking about them being mutilated that looked like they were done surgically.
Well, now there's got to be other cattle ranches around the area. Has anyone checked to see if some of their cattle has been mutilated also? And it could be coyotes, wolves, or something else doing that instead of this mysterious thing on Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, you're right. I mean, in my quick search I didn't do a super in-depth search, because I know there's different ones I could take and turn to their websites, and some of them get very much into the mutilation. But the bad part, though, under Henry, is when you go to their websites, they're promoting, these subjects. Mutilation has to be mutilation, has to be done by aliens, etc. And by the way, if you want to join my website, it costs you so much a month. The question is, where is that line between where everything is truly fact at, and then where everything becomes maybe assumptions at, or it leads you out in another direction just to pull in people to view the website. That's where I'm hesitant about, and that's why when I look for information, there's different ones that I'm very hesitant about their websites, about the accuracy of the data. Because at one time their data may have been very good, the facts may have been very accurate, but then again, as time goes on, are those same standards being kept, let's say? Or are you not just looking for the next donor?
Right.
That's the problem I've really got.
So I would love for you to be out there, Thomas, but for a different reason. And that is one thing that I haven't seen there yet, is any evidence that they brought someone out who's been an abductee, or anybody with any sort of psychic ability, to see what they're picking up and if that would make a difference in the activity.
That was really the biggest reason I wanted to go there myself.
There you go. See, we would have somebody who's been an abductee.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a road trip.
Yep. I'm ready.
I don't doubt if I don't know if I would get on or not, because in the one picture of the ranch, I did see the guy that looked like he had an AR-15 standing at the gate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to be invited, that's for sure.
Well, I'm hesitant about going around places where they have AR-15s and gates. Because there's on something totally off the subject. A number of years ago, my daughter danced ballet, and she went to Taiwan to perform for a few weeks. And I volunteered to go along to with the company because I designed out their props. I designed out all their props at the time to disassemble and be able to be transported on board aircraft. So I went over to make sure they could put everything back together, and also went along as security, because at the time I was training very, very heavy in the martial arts. My weight, by the way, I wasn't like the elephant I look like now, who can only get his black belt around once. My black belt went around my waist multiple times at that time. And what I went over there. Now, this is where you get the awakening on there, Henry, when you just walked into a different country. I got off the plane in Taiwan, and they went to run my passport through customs, and they said, I made out in Chinese that my passport was invalid. And I'm like, no, it's perfectly valid. And they ran it through like 3-4 times. And then they called down this guy that was head of customs. And he went with an interpreter that went to meet me there, from a representative from a Chinese group. Well, they went to run my passport through some place else in customs, and they told me to stand in this fenced-in area. Ooh. And I had two guards standing at the gate of this fenced-in area with automatic rifles. And that's when Toto, you learn you're not in Kansas.
They're not in Kansas anymore.
And one of my friends says, "Come on out here and tell me what's going on." I said, "If you don't mind, I'd rather not." And he goes, "Well, who told you?" I said, "The guy standing in front of me with the automatic rifles." They said, "Don't move." So if you don't mind, I'm not going to move. But they got everything cleared up, and there's a whole nother story behind that. But you really learn at that point. It's a different culture. But when I saw that AR-15 in that picture, I thought of the flashback going back years ago. So, I really would like to go out there, Barbara. I mean, I hope they're listening to the show. I'd really love to go out and look at the ranch from my viewpoint of, somebody that may have to be able to sense unusual activity going on that's not being picked up on camera, not being picked up on EMF detectors of any sort, and, look at things from a different perspective.
Well, also, if you've had any sort of ability that you can sort of pick up on any type of communication, it would seem to me that would be interesting. If the voices from those burned out ranch buildings were indeed alien.
Exactly. And now, this is really weird, Barbara, but before you mentioned that, I had a vision popping up of those buildings in my mind and walking through those buildings. And you're right. I just really wonder if I could sense something. Like when you hear those voices, is there something more to it? Do I discern not just a voice, but maybe what that voice is originating from? Is there something much more to it?
How? I know that there's a distance between ranches, but how far do you think a voice or sound would travel that you might be hearing from a distance?
From what I could see, just from the show the other night, it looked like the closest ranch was maybe like 5 miles or more away. I'm just guessing. And when you look at Google Earth, again, it looks like a fair distance too. And I can't see voices traveling like 5 miles at night. I could picture, maybe, and again, I'm just going off the top of my head here, maybe about half the length of a football field, maybe a football field, depending on how quiet the region is, because I wonder how much, background noise you may have, because there are oil wells in the region. There's other activity like that they may be picking up. Looking at one of the maps in front of me right now, there's a tower. I don't know how many miles it is away, maybe 5 or 10 miles away from the ranch. It's about 300 feet high. There's a little small, I wouldn't call it a city, a little small town maybe called Roosevelt, which is kind of off to the northwest. That I don't know how much, noise you'd be picking up from that. But there's not much in that region. I mean, when they're talking about towns, you're talking about just a little small cluster of homes, basically, Henry.
Wow.
But I'm thinking maybe on a good night, half a football field, maybe a football field in length, you could hear somebody.
Now, since they've taken over this ranch, they have put up high-powered video cameras and all over the ranch. So, have they said if they've ever caught anything like Skinwalker transforming from one thing to another?
No, I haven't seen anything along those lines. Pretty much the only thing I've seen is, along the effects of like an aura appearing along the like a ridge, right, mountain ridge. I've seen like some things that appear to almost be like meteors maybe coming down. You can see some stars off at a distance, but not like any beings walking across the ground, transforming things along those lines. At least those stories haven't been made available. And the thing that, that we're not going to know, because it's probably not going to come out, is what did Bigelow's group find, because they'd had that ranch for 10 plus years.
Right.
Did they catch something that is never just going to come out? I mean, maybe he just got to the point that, okay, either maybe they ran across stuff that they couldn't explain, that they started getting intimidated, and maybe they said, maybe it's time we just back out. We don't want to be involved with this because we have no clue what's going on.
Uh-oh, what's that?
That's Jeff.
Jeff?
Jeff, was he watching?
I was looking. No, I was looking something up, and the stupid thing had a soundtrack to it.
I thought you were watching Kung Fu Theater there for a second, Jeffrey.
Wow.
There's so many things, though, Henry. I'd love to do a road trip to that region out there. I really would. Because there's just so much stuff, so many questions I have that aren't answered, that maybe they're going to answer them in upcoming episodes of their TV show. Able to get the number of those. But the biggest thing is, like what Barbara brought up, I'd like to walk the grounds myself to see if I have any sensations of activity going on of any sort that I can sense. And I'm hesitant sometimes about saying that, like the psychic, feelings, but basically that's what it is. It's like a psychic type feeling that something's going on, whether it be like some sort of a entity that I'm sensing out there. Because we've talked about in the past, like paranormal activity. Mm-hmm. What if there's a sensation of something from, the native Indian culture out there? Mm-hmm. Maybe there is something to the curse.
Well, I'm also trying to figure out the history of why those buildings were abandoned and left to rot like that. But also, from a paranormal perspective, you also get EVPs that tell you to get out. That's not uncommon. So right. Where's the line there? Is it, and it goes back to that paranormal show that has, it's not a ghost, it's an alien thing, which is, where's the crossover happening here?
Yeah, you're right. Where's the crossover? And when you mention about the stuff, there, one of the things I read about is they made a comment that when Bigelow's group pulled out, it seemed like they just left some stuff behind that they didn't care about pulling it and taking it with them. Is it because maybe they just wanted to get out in a hurry and figured, okay, let's get the most valuable stuff out, like data drives, and let's leave the rest? But you're right, though. Where is that crossover between paranormal and maybe the UFOs?
Well, also, the ranch that they're on, or the buildings that they were walking into, looked almost like Quonset huts. It doesn't look like the actual ranch house. I thought Bigelow's group actually had a real ranch house there.
But don't they have like 3 or 4 ranch houses on the area?
I don't know.
They talk about the ranch houses, but when you look at the images from like Google Earth, it's not like a large ranch house like you're thinking. It's something actually fairly small. And that was their main one, because when you look at Google Earth, you can see an access road coming in from like the east. It goes straight across towards the west, and you can even see concrete barriers put up that somebody, if they came down through there, would have to weave through these concrete barriers to get back in there, because it's not like you could zip down a road at 60 miles an hour. If you tried doing that, you're going to run into these barriers. So it's definitely put there to restrict somebody from coming back. And then once you get back that road, it's just really almost, I'm guessing square footage-wise, Henry, maybe about 1,400 square feet or smaller at a guess. Is this house that they're calling like a ranch house. And it looks more like it's semi-abandoned when the people kind of like moved out in like the 1990s when they sold the ranch to Bigelow. That maybe Bigelow just barely maintained maintain stuff, and they might have put stuff out there to monitor, and who knows how much beyond that. But it doesn't seem like they set up anything for like a super permanent basis out there. And even when I read about the newer group that has their command center, it's not something that appears to be like set up in a permanent manner. It's just something that's been put there. I don't want to say to get through the show, but basically to get to the shows, to provide a command center.
Well, also the question beholds then, why put up so many concrete barriers to keep people from driving in if it's just a haunted ranch?
Yeah, and
it's really a question.
Yeah. Well,
and insurance too.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Somebody comes in and gets hurt, they could be liable.
Even if it's just somebody stepping into a rabbit hole and twisting their ankle.
Possible.
Yeah.
As many shows as you have now, or as many commercials you have now, call this number, and I'll get you money. Yeah, I can see that.
You've been injured on a paranormal investigation show. Come call.
That's right.
Well, maybe, but then if you have the gate up and then you have all these barriers and you have, it's more like a secured area than most ranches would be. Certainly they don't have that in a lot of other haunted locations.
No, and they did say they'd had a high number of people coming out after the book came out. The one you're talking about with Cole Kelleher and George Knapp, they said it started increasing. Yeah, when that book came out, they said they had a lot more people coming out there. And one of the people I had contact with 5 years ago, maybe, his name was Skinner. He wrote one of the books about Skinwalker Ranch. We thought about bringing him into our conference here in Ohio, flying him in, having him talk about the events going on. But we just couldn't really connect properly to get him in. But we wanted to hear from him firsthand on what his knowledge was about that whole region. Again, I was a little bit hesitant about some of the stories he was talking about, but even though some of the things really may have been weird, who knows how much truth might have been behind it. He was doing a little bit of the talking circuit, and he'd put out maybe, Barbara, about 1 or 2 books on the subject or something like that, and had a website involved with it.
Here's the other thing about the show that really made it interesting for me was, and you were talking this before about there being other types of ranches like this, is the magnetic stuff that was happening on there. It almost is like a Bermuda Triangle, but on land, with the type of magnetic abnormalities that they're finding.
Yeah, and that's what kind of interested me in some of the stories when I was talking to Ted Phillips about potentially 7 different places. He didn't even want to give me the location where this Marley Woods was at, but with my own investigative techniques, it took me about 15 minutes to find it on Google Earth, based on some very cryptic things he told me, and then he showed me a couple pictures, and that's all it took. I was able to identify the ground art details. And then in Pennsylvania, he said there was one, but he wouldn't tell me where it was at in Pennsylvania. And that was kind of driving me nuts because he didn't give me any indication there.
Did you try to look it up?
Yeah, I tried to look it up, but Ted, we had contact a number of years ago, and then he just kind of his health wasn't the best. And then we just kind of lost contact with him. Our region did. But I did find the one down in the Missouri area. That one was pretty easy to find. It was actually a field, but what was interesting about that was he said that individuals down there reported orbs, and not just orbs in fields, but orbs appearing inside of buildings, like industrial type buildings down here. And I'm like, that is, to me, is really interesting because, here's this ball of energy appearing, according to the witnesses, up in the corner of the building itself. And they could just see this thing kind of just basically hovering and stationary up there, and then it disappeared. So it's and that's what also got to him, is where is this crossover between paranormal and UFOs? Or are they the same?
our time is just breezing right on by pretty fast here. We got like 5 minutes left. So, Barbara, you got some more questions that he can answer fast?
I've been rattling off a lot of questions here.
You told me you had a ton.
Well, I did, and I think he's been pretty good about answering them. Other than, the communication-wise, since you're home more, do you think any communications are a little bit more open now? Are you communicating more, or have you had any more intuitions about UFOs and aliens?
It's been pretty much, the same, but it goes through spurts, Barbara. It's one of these things that, I'll be going along and nothing will happen, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, maybe for like multiple nights in a row, I'll have unusual experiences, unusual feelings that something happened. It was just that the other day, when I was reviewing some details on actually going back over some of the things on Skinwalker, I had some really unusual feelings, sensations regarding some of the things I read. Some of the things I just kind of looked over and just like, yeah. Then there's a couple things that just kind of like stuck out, and it felt like a connection somehow, that I guess you could say some sort of a psychic connection was the best way to describe it. So there's a couple instances there. And the one thing I need to do is I need to start writing these things down, because at times I'll wake up and felt like something happened, or I'll be laying in bed and felt like something happened, and I don't write it down, and I'm getting that age group that I forget stuff very easy, unfortunately. But I need to write more of that stuff down, but I've had some sensations, but it just kind of go in spurts.
In little spurts.
Little spurts, that's right.
Wow. It has been interesting talking about Skinwalker Ranch, and you need to see if you can't find somebody to contact out there, and see if you can't get us to drop by for a bit.
Woohoo!
I'd like to. I really would, and that's why I say I hope somebody in your listening audience is associated with them, because I have a volunteer who'd be willing to come out. I'll even drive out at my own expense.
There you go.
To get on the ranch, I would like to walk around and see if I do sense something from like a psychic point of view. That maybe that there's something that I can pick up, like you said, Henry, in either feelings or you hear voices or something, and maybe I can put something with the voice.
And I would definitely be using my recorders too. So who knows, might catch something.
Oh, without a doubt. I've got my recorders in my office I'd gladly take with me.
Okay, we got we got less than 2 minutes. I just wanted to let everybody know that next week we have Tim Shaw will be on with us. And he is always a good guest, and he was one of the first people that he was at the first investigation I was ever on. So he might say took me by the arm and showed me different things. So he'll be on next week. So do stop by and join us for that. He is very good. So you want to give out all your information about your show and where people can listen and follow you and contact you?
Well, if they want to hear my show, my show is called UFODyssey, and it's on a network called Odyssey One. They can find it, by the way, on iHeartRadio or Spotify. I think it's been on over a year now. Wow, I made it a year. Imagine that. And if they want to contact me in any other way, they can also reach out through MUFON of Ohio. On our MUFON of Ohio website, there's a link that actually has not only my email contact information, but also my phone number that they can call me after 1 o'clock or after 11 o'clock at night if they want. But
Now, you're not actually having your
that's the best way to
own.
contact me.
Sorry, you're having your local meetings third Saturday of the month are kind of off for the moment,
No.
aren't they?
No, we've canceled everything. As a matter of fact, I had a number of library talks and also some talks at state parks and stuff set up, and all those have been canceled until October right now.
Oh,
There's a few of them looking at the middle of the year, but the ones now that are going through like April and May, those are all been canceled.
We got to go.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show. And until next week at the same time, this is Henry Foister.
Jeffrey Gould.
And Barbara Duncan.
We'll see you next week at the same time. So good night, everybody. You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal View.